Hello everyone, this is Matt Helmer from the Aspen Institute Workforce Strategies Initiative. I want to welcome you to today's webinar, Social Enterprise and Workforce Development, the Goodwill Experience. This is the third webinar in a series of 4 that is specifically exploring social enterprises and workforce development. First of all, we'd like to thank the Charles Stewart Mott Foundation, the Ford Foundation, the Sturton Foundation, and the Hitachi Foundation for supporting this work. And we'd like to thank you all once again for joining us in this conversation. So what is it we're trying to do today? We're really going to, like I said, kind of dive into the Goodwill experience in terms of how they think about social enterprise, what have been some of their successes, what have been some of their failures, what have they really learned about what it takes to run a social enterprise, and how does that kind of align with their mission in terms of job training and workforce development. We'll also explore some of that work as well. So we're going to hear a lot of tips and advice and stories today from our guest presenters. I'm going to introduce them right now. We're very, very fortunate to have Jim Gibbons, President and CEO of Goodwill Industries International. He'll be kicking things off today once I'm finished with some opening remarks. And then we have Lorna Utley, who's President and CEO of Goodwill Industries of Greater Detroit. Lorna was the winner of the 2014 Matthews Entrepreneurial Award from Goodwill Industries International, so she is at the top of the social enterprise work among the Goodwill Network and is seen as one of Goodwill's leading innovators in the social enterprise space, and we're very fortunate and lucky to have Lorna with us as well today. And she'll talk a little bit more about her experience in Detroit in terms of starting social enterprises and what kind of opportunities that has created for the Detroit community. Jim will start the webinar by providing more of that kind of 30,000-foot overarching look at social enterprise from Goodwill Industries International's main office in Baltimore. So what is a social enterprise? Just as a reminder, this is kind of our definition that we've been operating off of for the past 2 webinars and now our 3rd webinar. It's a definition that comes from the Social Enterprise Alliance, and it basically says that social enterprises are businesses, that's important to remember, but they also have a primary purpose of promoting the common good. So from our perspective, there's at least 2 reasons we're looking at social enterprise, and there's probably more than that, but we at the Aspen Institute, as many of you know, are researching and documenting and trying to facilitate conversations around both job quality as well as job training. I think in the last decade there have been some remarkable and disturbing trends in some sense that have appeared in our labor markets. Number one, there are some systemic and structural barriers that many populations face in today's economy that prevent them from entering and succeeding in the labor market. So one of the reasons we want to look at social enterprises is really to figure out how that model can help those populations overcome those barriers and be more successful in our labor markets. The other disturbing trend is that, as many of you know, coming out of this recession over the last few years, we have started to create jobs, and that's been pretty consistent now for the past few years, but a lot of those jobs that we've been creating tend to be low-quality jobs that often offer low pay, few benefits, and limited training and advancement opportunities. So we also want to take the time to look at social enterprises and figure out how they might be able to reverse these trends, how they can offer and promote a different way of doing business that helps both workers and businesses succeed. So we'll be diving into some of those topics today as well. Some of the questions we've been exploring throughout this series and that we'll continue to discuss today are just kind of generally around what are the challenges of starting a social enterprise. What does it really take in terms of key capacity, key knowledge, staffing, all of those type of things to run a successful enterprise? I think those of us in workforce development have a lot to learn from the wider field of social entrepreneurship. So we want to bring those voices into these conversations as well and make sure that we're not always trying to recreate the wheel, but are really trying to learn from this field that is in some ways very distinct and separate from what workforce development traditionally does. Finally, throughout this series, we're also trying to facilitate some conversation about the role of philanthropy in supporting social enterprises, and we also want to dive into how public policy can better support these models as well. So just a quick background, and then we're going to jump to some polls to get a better sense of who is on the call with us today. This series, this social enterprise series, was really came out of our Working in America discussion series. So for the last 2 years in Washington, D.C., and coming soon to you in cities around the country, we've been facilitating some dialogue around job quality and the changing nature of work in today's economy, with a particular focus on the challenges of low-wage workers and how we can better support their success. And social enterprise stood out to us as a particular strategy that we wanted to explore more and highlight more in a way that facilitated some conversation about how we could better support low-income workers in today's economy. So this is the third webinar in a series of 4. There were 2 previous webinars. Hopefully some of you had the chance to see those. The first one was back in April. It was called Social Enterprise Fundamentals, and the second one was also in April or early May, I believe, Social Enterprise and Workforce Development Outcomes and Experiences from the Field. Those recordings from those webinars are available on our website, as are the video recordings from our Working in America discussion series. So here shortly, I'm going to turn it over to Jim, and he's going to walk us through kind of the history of Goodwill and how they think about social enterprise. Before we do that, we just want to get a sense of who's on today's webinar, so we're going to do a couple of quick polls just to see who's joining us today. The first poll is, what type of organization do you represent? So select one answer and then hit submit, and we'll get a sense of what kind of institutions are represented on today's call. So you should be able to select your answer. You hit submit, and then you should start to see a bar chart populate your screen. So right now we have about almost 120 total responses. We have about 140 people joining us on the webinar. Most of the people on today's webinar are from community-based organizations, about 40% of you, about 10% of you from government agencies, 8% or so from community colleges, and it's kind of scattered throughout the rest, a good mix of people on today's webinar from different institutions. So we're going to skip to the next one and kind of get a better sense of what your interest in social enterprise is. So this is a check all that applies, so you can select more than one answer. And it is, what is your interest in today's topic? I am interested in, and then there are numerous choices there, and you can select as many as you'd like. Once again, after you select your answers and hit submit, you should start to see a bar chart populate your screen. Keep in mind this is a check all that apply poll, so it's not going to add up to 100%. It's going to be showing higher percentages of people based on which answers they selected in total. So right now, the three most popular things people are interested in are, number 1, growth and sustainability strategies, number 2, common challenges of enterprises, and number 3, measuring the outcomes of enterprises. So we'll try to keep those in mind and touch on those throughout today's presentation. And one more quick poll before we jump to Jim's presentation. This is just asking, what is your experience with social enterprise? And again, this is a check all that applies, so you may have numerous roles or numerous ways that you engage with social enterprise, so you can check all that apply here as well. Again, hit your answer and hit submit. And you should start to see that bar chart come up on your screen. We have about 110 answers right at the moment. About a little over a third of you have no experience with enterprises. About a third of you as well are thinking of starting a social enterprise. About 15 to 20% manage an enterprise, 9% fund an enterprise. A good number of you, over a fifth, are partnering with a social enterprise, and about a quarter of you are researching social enterprises. So a variety of interests there as well. So we'll have some more polls midway through today's webinar, but I do want to turn it over to Jim Gibbons now, President and CEO of Goodwill Industries International, to talk about Goodwill and how they view social enterprise and some of what they've learned about what it takes to run a successful enterprise. So Jim, whenever you're ready, feel free to take it away.
Great. Thank you, Matt. And good afternoon, or hello to everyone. Some of you, I guess, might still be in the morning. It's great to be with you today, and I hope that I'm able to be useful to you through this presentation and through some Q&A. I'm going to try to adjust the best I can based on what I just saw people's interests are, and try to go a little deeper in some areas. So let me first start by sharing with you what the mission of Goodwill is. And our mission really does revolve around the power of work and learning. And really, we exist to enhance the dignity and quality of life for individuals and families by strengthening communities and eliminating barriers to opportunity. That's our sweet spot. We really focus a lot on work, but then try to look at people in a very holistic way. And what we learned years ago is that the job in and of itself is not the whole answer. It's really looking at a person and all the other factors in a person's life that allows them to be successful on the job for long term. So getting it is not the end of the process. Our real vision, which really comes from a heritage statement, a statement of our founder, so the language is from earlier in the 1900s, but we think is quite powerful, and it's Friends of Goodwill, be dissatisfied until every person with a handicap or unfortunate person has the potential to achieve their full potential and enjoy an abundance of happiness. I think that's pretty powerful. I think in today's language we'd probably change it a little bit. But at the end of the day, I think the reason that Goodwill has continued to thrive for more than 110 years is really partially due to this statement from our founder, which says, challenge the status quo. Always challenge the status quo. And I think that's really an underlying characteristic of what I observe with Goodwills around the country every day. And because of our structure, and I'll talk a little bit about our model right now, we have that opportunity to challenge the status quo in pretty powerful ways all of the time and really figure out what challenges are working. Our model is really a distributed network. We're a networked organization of 165 Goodwills in the United States and Canada, and we have presence in 14 countries. But it really is this networked organization of Goodwills that work very autonomously and very interdependently all at the same time. And the autonomous nature of our structure really allows each Goodwill to morph to their community needs. And when it comes to human services and workforce development, each community is pretty unique. It's pretty difficult to figure out from Washington, D.C. what's best in Akron, Ohio or Detroit, Michigan. And so the structure that we have is actually, I find, quite nimble in solving local community problems and being a part of those solutions with a local community. It doesn't mean that there aren't days where, we think we could capture synergies quicker, but net, Goodwills are quite effective at piloting, replicating, scaling, and sustaining. And so for many of you on the line who are thinking about starting a social enterprise, some of this really is in the context of a multi-billion-dollar networked enterprise, and would not be perfectly relevant to you. But I often have people who have started organizations really try to understand how do they scale, and that ability to morph to the local community needs, but still share ideas is a very important attribute of Goodwill. When we talk about the value creation and value distribution, and you think about how social enterprise is really becoming an important dialogue in the country today, and the definition that Matt shared out of the Social Enterprise Alliance, I think is a good one. It also, I think, can be thought of in terms of value distribution. A market capitalist company has to move with its customer markets and understand those changing needs, and then distributes the value that's created in one simple way, the same way we've always done with investors, and distributes that return to the investors. In our model, the value distribution model is quite different. The value distribution model is really all the value that is created is then distributed into the local communities. And our structure allows for that in a powerful way, so that value creation doesn't go to a corporate center, but stays in a community by way of services, employment generated, and community engagement. So the value distribution, I think, is really key to social enterprise. And there are for-profit social enterprises. There were questions about structure. And there's a lot that is evolving right now, whether it's for-benefit corporations or for-profits that view themselves as social enterprise because X% of their profits go towards a social cause, or how they are structured. It really is ultimately about the degree of value that is distributed for the mission purpose of the organization. So the not-for-profit structures, which Goodwill is a hybrid social enterprise utilizing a 501c3 corporate status, really does mean that 100% of the value has to be distributed towards the cause. A for-profit organization might have more flexibility in terms of the value distribution, and possibly even more possibility in terms of capital and capital acquisition. But the value distribution is really the key element in terms of how a social enterprise model works and attains impact. Later I'll talk a little bit about how we try to measure impact. Right now it's simply talking about the level of value distribution, and in our model how it's distributed within the local community. A little bit about kind of how we got here and where we came from is we were formed in 1902 by Reverend Edgar Helms. He was a Methodist minister in Boston, and really he started collecting goods from the wealthy and had this idea that collect from the wealthy and give to the poor. And there's a story about really opening up a church with lots of goods in it, and it was kind of a madhouse, and he had to shut the doors because the giveaway model wasn't working. And somebody said, "Can I buy that coat?" And then somebody else said, "Hey, can I repair that?" Or, "Hey, how about if I repair that and sell that?" And really that's where the Goodwill model and the Goodwill store was born, in a way that really started equating value and dignity to the process, in terms of what's meaningful to people, and really started creating employment opportunities for immigrants in Boston. And that's how it all started, and then it started growing, and then eventually he thought a cooperative, because more Goodwills were popping up, was necessary, and that's how Goodwill Industries International was formed. And by the 1930s, Edgar Helms thought that maybe we shouldn't be a faith-based organization. We'd have greater and broader reach by being a secular organization. In the 50s, we started really learning how to share information and convening in a way that allowed us to replicate and grow. And in the 90s, with a lot of the welfare reform, is really when we started learning that the job was not as powerful as that is, and as much as our mission revolves around work and the job, really looking at somebody holistically and removing all the barriers to employment, whether those revolve around daycare or financial management, the ability to manage your financials, transportation, and a variety of issues that impact a person's opportunity to go to work and keep work were pretty important. And since then, we've really evolved to a full family and financial strengthening mindset across Goodwill. Today, I mentioned we have 165 Goodwills in the United States and Canada. We have presence in 14 other countries. There are more than 2,900 Goodwill stores, and we have 122,000 team members across the Goodwill enterprise. I think at the beginning of the recession, we were at about 89,000 team members. So over the course of this recession, we've been able to grow more than 30,000 jobs within the Goodwill enterprise. When you think about that network, and I'll come back to this in the context of how we measure, that network has the opportunity to serve millions of people, place hundreds of thousands of people into jobs within their communities, stick with people as they go to work, maybe lose a job and go back to work, and work with people to become credentialed, which is really a big focal point for us today. And we think that stackable credentials are very important for a person's ongoing success. If you think about it, the economy that we're stepping into and are really a part of, this knowledge economy, ongoing credentialing, ongoing learning, are really going to be critical in this kind of think and heads-up economy that we're a part of. And that, I think, is one of our bigger challenges going into the future, and not just Goodwill's challenges, but our community's challenges, our country's challenges, and in fact, it'll be a global challenge. When we think about how do we grow, it takes a variety of mechanisms of capital. And all four of these types of capital are very important for Goodwill, both at the Goodwill Industries International, from a Goodwill Industries International perspective, and for a local Goodwill perspective. But all four types of capital are important for our ongoing growth. Economic, political, social, and human. Each Goodwill has a local board of directors. That board of directors brings both political and social capital into the organization. The Goodwill itself as an organization, as a community leader, develops social capital within that community, but certainly economic capital, which for us could be anywhere from a variety of financing mechanisms to the donation of your spring cleaning to cash contributions. The economic capital is a critical driver. And then the human capital. When you're thinking about 122,000 team members, your human capital is critical, and your management capacity is core for your ongoing competitiveness and sustainability. When we think about growth and the attributes for ongoing impact and growth, I would characterize some key attributes for us as being common mission, brand, and strategic intent, a core infrastructure, a backbone to build off of, and a culture of leadership. And if you think about those three elements, the Goodwill brand, which has been recognized as really a household name. I mean, you see it in books, movies, the book Gone Girl, that Jack Reacher movie. You would see, you see the Macklemore rap song that was filmed at the Goodwill in Seattle and had, 500 million YouTube downloads. I mean, Goodwill is really a household name and a brand that has developed because of this common brand, mission, and strategic intent. Not because we are like a Procter & Gamble and have the ability to drive our brand strategy because it's 3 or 5 or 8% of our top line revenue on our marketing efforts. It really is driven by this common mission and strategic intent. The infrastructure that Goodwills bring to their local communities and that GII brings to Goodwills is a core component of our ability to move with the changing marketplace for both the business and community changing needs from a mission delivery perspective. That infrastructure or backbone has always been key to our ability to morph and to change as the world around us evolves and the needs around us change. And then a culture of leadership, which I think is important for a large organization, and especially one like ours. We're a complex organization, and this definition of leadership from a complexity theory perspective, I always kind of chuckle at it because it's complex in and of itself. But it really, what it says to me, it speaks to the individual Goodwills and their leaders, the autonomous nature of our structure, and the ability to move through ambiguity and the gray areas to change and innovate and be entrepreneurial on the ground within communities. So as complex as that sounds, it really is the definition of leadership, the way I think about it in this complex system, really has these 5 attributes. It has an ability to gather information. Goodwills within community have sensors out all the time. The donated goods retail model allows us to reach deep into communities, to not just operate with a headquarters infrastructure, but to be deeper within communities. The management, the leadership, the board of directors all play a role in really sensing and understanding the community needs, and then couple those with the more disciplined tools and approaches. An entrepreneurial and risk management kind of capacity. I am the CEO of Goodwill Industries International. I am a manager. I have a leadership obligation and responsibility to the whole network, but I'm not and don't characterize myself as an entrepreneur. I'd like to say that, but it's not what I do. But each local Goodwill leader really is a social entrepreneur. They're in the community, identifying community problems on the ground, and leveraging the Goodwill brand and infrastructure and mission to be a part of the solutions within those communities. So that entrepreneurial characteristic, problem solving, having a kind of a generative approach is a key element of leadership within what I'd characterize as the Goodwill culture. Being a community builder is core to Goodwill's leadership kind of attributes. And then how we're structured for decision making. We are heavily driven towards local decision making, but we have processes to take positions and work together collectively across all Goodwill. We don't always do it quickly, but we do it in a way that is engaged and inclusive, and always starts with a dialogue to understand what problem we're solving and what question we're asking. And then finally, the kind of the administrative and execution elements of it. Goodwill's part of our leadership culture is excellence in execution. So when you take these attributes of really sensing and listening, of entrepreneurial and risk-taking, of community building, of structuring for decision-making, and then executing, you can create a culture of leadership that I think is what has sustained Goodwill and will sustain Goodwill through really probably our most competitive portion of our history that's existing right now. From a leadership perspective, I can tell you what I've observed since I've been at Goodwill is that the leaders of Goodwill, and we hold a lot of conferences for learning, the leaders are very learning-oriented. And, at our face-to-face conference, or where we do a lot of webinars, people stay to the end of the game. They don't leave early. They're not out on the golf course. They are there, even when we have an economist that I may not even find so interesting myself doing the closing session. The room is full and engaged, and I think that's a core element to any social enterprise. If you think about utilizing all of the core management techniques and practices, ultimately to survive in a world that requires not only those sound practices, but innovation to solve problems that nobody's figured out how to solve, you've got to have a learning organization, and you have to have a leadership culture, whether your organization is complex or simple. That notion of learning and innovating is core to everything we do. Spend a few moments on just measurements. We try to track a lot of things, and we try to focus on fewer subset of that. We do track people served. It is not how it's what I'd characterize as, and we have various integrated and we're trying to evolve into more ecosystem measurements. And we haven't cracked the code on this perfectly yet. It's I think, a pretty tough nut to crack. So traditionally we track people served, but we've realized that people served are not a measure of impact. We track people placed. We think that's closer, because when you track that significant activity, when you surround the individual with holistic services, when you're there, if that first job doesn't work out, it's kind of like a lifetime relationship with Goodwill, we think that's quite impactful and useful. And now we're starting to track credentialing in terms of stackable credentials. But if we try to evolve our thinking from these integrated impact measures to more of a ecosystem, the way we're starting to think about credentialing is using some Georgetown work on workforce that helps us kind of translate that into a person's lifetime earning potential. I don't know if this is exactly right, but I think it's a step forward for us in terms of how do we measure impact and how do we think about it. I and probably many of you have been to, conferences where there's a social return on investment session, or heck, I've been to a whole conference on it, and I still never got the answer. It's not an easy answer, and I think when you think of the social enterprise space, you got to first think about the value distribution component, and then you got to think about what problem you're solving, and then it's not going to be a one number, one size fits all social impact number, across the entire sector. So this is how we're thinking about it right now, and working to evolve our level of understanding and measurement of impact. As we think about the challenges that we're facing great challenges. The competitive landscape for us is growing. Our marketplace is one where the Goodwills over their histories have demonstrated that there's value in this marketplaces, and when there's value, you attract competition. And the for-profit thrift space is a significant competitor to us right now. Our challenges with allocation of capital when the human needs are so great, and how do we make those decisions? I think our model with a local economy helps us do that actually efficiently. Because again, I think making those determinations in Washington, D.C. Doesn't make sense. But how do you allocate capital in terms of, do you focus on growing your enterprise model, where in our case we use it as a vehicle for delivering mission, for on-the-job training, for transitional employment, and for job training, and as an economic engine to help support additional programming and human services. How do you allocate that capital? And each board of directors will face those challenges, and they face it more when times are tight. Talent acquisition. When you're in an industry that is facing more competitive challenges, disruptive technologies, and there's a need for innovative leaders, you have to pay competitively to attract them, to be part of solving the most pressing challenges. I think talent acquisition is another challenge that we have. We invest in our leadership development, and about half of our new CEOs come out of our leadership development programs, and about half come out of the broader marketplace. But we really need talent at all levels for a leadership culture to sustain itself. It's not simply the CEO level leadership that counts. It's leadership throughout the organization, from the case manager and the store manager to the executive team, to really exhibit the types of attributes that I discussed earlier. And then finally, how do we deal with maintaining a low-cost structure when we use our business infrastructure for mission delivery, which raises our cost structure in a more and more competitive environment? So those are some of the key things that we're dealing with. At a much more macro level, the long-term unemployment figures, the 3.8 million people that are long-term unemployed, are a great challenge to us and our partners, both nationally and locally. And then I think the changing landscape in terms of what the job opportunities over the course of the next 10 to 20 years are really means that we have to evolve our thinking in terms of continuing to be a great workforce organization, but also think differently in terms of all types of opportunities, whether those are entrepreneurial. We have Goodwills around the country that have some great entrepreneurial programs, but it's not core to what we do and doesn't need to be. And right now we're going through an extensive process to really articulate what's our vision and our strategy for the next 10 to 15 years. So, right now, Goodwill has found, I think, a great deal of success over the course of this tough recession. But I think the challenges continue to come at us, and this culture of leadership is going to be core to our ability to continue to grow and have the impact that we've been fortunate to be a part of over our history. So with that, Matt, I can pause and just see what's on people's minds.
Sure.
If that makes sense.
Thank you so much, Jim. That was great. One of the things that comes up is that Goodwill is it's sometimes referred to as being in the donated goods business, and other times people think of it as being kind of more in the retail sector. I'm curious to hear kind of how you view what industry the Goodwill stores are in, and what that means for how you make decisions, how you measure performance, and how you think about the overall kind of success of the stores.
we're in the donated goods retail industry. So we do combine it. It's interesting. The donation process is the supply chain. The retail stores are the distribution outlet, or that's where the end customers are. The great thing about Goodwill, or at least my observation, has been that because of the social enterprise approach of the stores and lots of other social enterprises that Goodwill's deliver, that customer focus has been kind of ingrained into our culture. And so, it kind of becomes fungible, and I think, Goodwills generally do a pretty good job of thinking of program participants, understanding their needs from a customer's perspective, donors from a customer perspective, and try to infuse ourselves with that kind of customer mindset for every experience with the brand. Doesn't mean that when you have 122,000 team members, we don't miss it once in a while. But being customer-driven and market-driven, whether that means on the enterprise side or the human services side, I think helps us stay relevant and keep our edge. The challenge is that in today's world, the competition, it's more than just competition coming at us. It may be true industry disruptors because of technology and changing markets. And that's what I think we're ready for, because we have this culture of leadership. But, it's going to take us to, you don't just execute your way out of those challenges. You've got to innovate your way out of those challenges. And that's what, we've got to be ready to do on a go-forward basis.
What are some of the new lines of business or new trends that you see Goodwill starting businesses in? I know some Goodwills are starting alternative staffing organizations. Some are starting construction companies. What do you see happening from your perspective that excites you in terms of kind of new directions that Goodwill entrepreneurs are starting businesses in? Well,
let me just say that I think the donated goods retail is a pretty exciting space in and of itself, and we have a trend of growing boutiques. We have an e-commerce capacity that we've had some what I'd call disruptors that we've embraced, and instead of trying to out-business case it, we've embraced it, and it's been a part of our growth. We have developed capabilities on other stages of the retail, from the consumer retail to the wholesale marketplace, where we serve thousands and thousands of other entrepreneurs throughout local communities with goods that aren't necessarily right for the retail store. Other entrepreneurial businesses, and I think Lorna's going to talk about some, but range from the document management and digital data conversion. We've made some good strides in those spaces, which are good employment generators. We like our endeavors to drive employment, not to just drive profit, right? So we look for business lines that create jobs, and we have a lot of we have failures. I think what you find in an organization like Goodwill that you try things and they don't all work. I think the staffing agencies have been a pretty good sweet spot for many Goodwills because they've got a flow of talent, and then if they can find the marketplace, they get people into new types of jobs. And can leverage the retail experience, because customer service skills are very important across a lot of industries. So we can leverage our donated goods infrastructure for people to find new opportunities through staffing agencies. So, those are some of the big ones. I think one of our, I guess I wouldn't, I don't know that I'd characterize it as a social enterprise, but this notion of credentialing and our partnerships with community colleges I think is one of our most important initiatives. In a Thinking to Action workshop we had, what came out of that with, I think the Aspen Institute was there, and some community college leaders, and some great Goodwills. We realized that there's a huge opportunity, if you look at the pros and cons of strengths and weaknesses of Goodwills and community colleges, we really complement each other. And out of that, we've formed, I think, relationships and partnerships with more than 120 community colleges and more than 85 Goodwill communities. And that credentialing is the key. And those models range from asset sharing models with the community colleges to models where the revenue will come in through the Goodwill, to models where the revenue will come in through the community college and Goodwill as a sub. So in many ways, those are educational enterprise, social enterprise models, but I think very important for our current economy, and it allows Goodwills to really leverage our current infrastructure and really create more pathways for success for employees and other people we serve.
Great. So since you mentioned the employees, let's talk a little bit maybe about the workers in the store. I think, in social enterprise and workforce development, we often think of social enterprises as either providing a transitional job or a permanent job. But I think in Goodwills, you probably do a little bit of both. So, many people go to work in a Goodwill store. For some, it's a transitional job that hopefully they leverage to gain experience and go on to a better job. For some, though, they may have found a good home in Goodwill, and they may want to stay in that store and develop a career internally with Goodwill. How do you think about kind of supporting those two different populations, and what are some of the common strategies for supporting both of them?
I think it's really, even over the course of this last 10 years, it started blurring. I think we started realizing that you got to have a start-at-home strategy. You start thinking in terms of mission services to people who don't work at Goodwill, and you say, how do you help people really achieve a living wage, especially people who have started with some pretty significant barriers? And then what about our own team? So what we've seen more and more is more greater mission integration within that donated goods retail infrastructure, more services provided directly to team members. So a person is both an employee and a person receiving services, and a real open mind and open heart to trying to understand what a person's goals are and how they can leverage that experience at Goodwill to achieve their dreams in or outside of Goodwill. And many of those dreams, I think, are achieved within Goodwill, and many are achieved not within Goodwill. And so working with employees, whether they're transitional or not, with an open mind for what their goals are, is, I think, a powerful attribute. And it doesn't mean that, store managers, for somebody, don't fight hard to keep somebody too, because sometimes, there's really talented people that, like any employer, you got to work hard to create a culture that people want to, grow in. And, we have those opportunities and challenges presented to us every day. But we really did move consciously into how do we have how do you start at home approach. And I think that's a very important thing, an important characteristic. And, when you think about, I don't know if this is politically wise or not, but like, we don't take a position on the federal minimum wage going up. Really what we talk about is how do we deal with it. We just accept it's going to go up. Now, how do you prepare yourselves so that we're not in a place to have to reduce team members? How do we prepare ourselves to get our cost structure in place so that we maintain employment? How do we prepare ourselves to deal with that, especially when you're dealing with, 60 to 70% of people with barriers, some of whom are still making the transition, etc. So how do we optimize on behalf of the team members? in a higher cost structure environment.
Great, Jim. Thanks so much. We're going to turn to Lorna in just a second, and hopefully you'll be able to stay on in case there's more time for Q&A at the end. So one final question for you. Goodwill operates internationally in many different countries. I think the research shows that social enterprise is used more widely in many countries compared to the United States. Could you talk a little bit from your point of view on why that is the case, and maybe what policymakers or what philanthropists need to do to better promote social enterprise in general in our country?
Actually, the Goodwill model, the donated goods model, retail model, we are having more success with now, but we've struggled with that in other countries. Because that model does take a consuming population. So when we would try to see what Goodwill could do or partner with some small mom and pop, not-for-profit, we struggled because if it didn't have a rising middle class and a consuming population, our model didn't necessarily work so well. So right now we're really targeting countries that have great human need but a rising middle class. So some of the Latin American countries, for example. We are also, being opportunistic in countries where we have partners that want to build out a new social enterprise but have management bandwidth and capacity to do it. So that's how we're thinking about our global expansion right now. From a global social enterprise perspective, a lot of what's happening from a social enterprise world where it's more embraced is social enterprises really trying to serve the bottom of the pyramid. So there's a marketplace there that, from a social impact perspective, that can be served and can be served using a variety of models. I don't think that the not-for-profit space is any better evolved in other countries than in the United States. But what happens is if you've got a larger bottom of the pyramid, that's a lot of people to serve. And if you can find the right niche products, you can really serve them through a social enterprise model, either through getting the right products and services to them through direct marketing or through other interventions. There are other countries that I think are ahead of us from a social impact investment perspective, but that's starting to get better dialogue and more legs here. I think what's going to happen here is we're going to get better, faster at defining impact and being more evidence-based and data-driven in that. We'll see more capital flowing for social impact investment here in the States. We're trying a variety of things ourselves with it right now. Did that answer your question?
Absolutely. Yep,
right.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Jim. Hopefully you'll be able to stay on the line in case there's some extra time at the end, but we really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to join us today and share your perspective and insight and lessons learned.
My pleasure.
So we're going to turn to Lorna in Detroit in just a second to learn more about what the Goodwill in Detroit is doing around social enterprise. Before we do that, just a few quick polls or questions to keep you engaged a little bit. So the first one's more kind of like a trivia question. How often did a Goodwill store open in the U.S. and Canada in 2013? So they opened one store every 2.5 days, every week, every 10.5 days, every 21 days, or don't know. So just make a guess, and we'll see, and then I'll tell you what the answer is. So once you hit the answer and hit submit, you should start to see that bar chart pop up on your screen again. Most people are guessing that a Goodwill store opened in the U.S. and Canada in 2013 about every 21 days. The fewest people said every 2.5 days, but those are the people that are correct. A Goodwill store opened on average in the U.S. and Canada in 2013 every 2.5 days. So that gives you some sense of how quickly they're growing and expanding. Just a little bit of a question about how often you go to a Goodwill store in your own community. How often do you visit a Goodwill store or other Goodwill business on average? Once a week, once a month, once every 6 months, once a year? Never. Again, this is just select one. Choose your answer and hit submit, and you'll see that bar chart. Quite a few of you, about a fifth of you, say you go about once a month. About 38%, 35, 40% say once every 6 months, so about twice a year. And about another fifth say once a year. And then one more question, and we'll jump to the next presentation. This asks you to think about how Goodwill in your community is viewed. So Goodwill in my community is known as a place that, and this is a select all that apply. So how do you think people perceive Goodwill in your local community? Do people view it as a place to go shopping, to donate goods, as a place that offers job training? How is it that Goodwill is perceived in your community? And if you don't have a Goodwill in your community, there's a box at the very end that says no Goodwill in my community. So select all that apply, hit submit. And we have about 100 answers coming in so far. About 70% say Goodwill is seen as a place that people can go shopping. About 85% say it's seen as a place that people can donate unwanted goods. About a third say that it's a place that is seen as offering job training or adult education. And about 40% is seen as a place that employs individuals with barriers. And about a third as supports the community. All right, so we're going to dive down into some local examples with Lorna Utley in Detroit, and she's going to talk about her experience in starting social enterprises in Motown. So Lorna, whenever you're ready, feel free to take it away.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm pleased to have the opportunity to talk with you today. It is my first webinar experience as being the speaker, so bear with me. And Matt, from a timing standpoint, how should I watch the time here so there's time for questions?
You got a good 20, 25 minutes. We can go over a little bit, so take as much time as you need.
Fair enough. Like Jim talked about, we were one of those organizations that was also started by a Methodist minister in a town right next to Detroit in 1921, Reverend Dr. John E. Martin. And he started out by borrowing some funds and providing opportunities for employment for the elderly and the disabled. And right from the beginning, it was a place to repair and sell donated items that came from our donors. Vocational training and support services were added at a later date. We, in 1970, merged with an organization called the League for the Handicapped, and for many years we were known as League Goodwill. And at the time, we were the largest private vocational rehab agency in the country. In '84, our board members recognized that Goodwill and that brand name had better identity and more power for sharing our message, and we returned to a Goodwill name, Goodwill Industries of Greater Detroit. Goodwill Industries of Greater Detroit is essentially the 5 counties in Metro Detroit. We have responsibility for that. We are one of 10 Goodwills in Michigan. A little bit about me, because I'm not a traditional Goodwill lifer, if you will. I went to Purdue University, and following that, I had a 28-plus year career in the automotive industry in various areas. I describe myself when thinking about my history as a recovering HR person. I came to Goodwill through the board experience after many years of serving on the board, including the board chair. I left automotive, did a couple other things, and then I was asked by the current board members to consider serving as their Vice President of Development. And in a career move, I suggested that I would not necessarily be a good Vice President of Development, but I would be interested in being CEO. And the next thing I knew, I was CEO, or was appointed as CEO, and I've been here for almost 7 years. We are a little different in many respects, which I'll get into in a moment, but we are, like almost all of my colleagues, focused on helping people with employment challenges become prepared and trained to work. When I got here, we had a very complicated inch-thick business plan and strategic plan, which we simplified. I borrowed my experience from the automotive industry at General Motors and did a one-page business plan and strategic plan. We consider this an evergreen strategic plan. It's updated each year for relevance and direction, but we don't start with a clean sheet every 3 to 5 years. Focusing on always fulfilling our mission, which is putting people with employment challenges to work, always in a financially stable way, engaging our team and valuing and engaging our team members, and our leading in community collaboration, and ensuring that our mission is understood and supported by the community. We do that through values of being customer-focused, respectful in all our engagements, transparent, and always with an eye on results. Our byline, trained, trusted, and ready to work, was established back in 07-08 with, again, trying to focus on what we do and what we do well. The social enterprises that we are involved in are a little different than many of my colleagues. Our primary one is automotive. We've been involved in that for 80-plus years of our 93 years of existence. We are a Tier 1 supplier to the domestic autos. That would be Ford, Chrysler, and GM. Chrysler is our biggest customer. We make and assemble products that go in the vehicle, like license bracket kits or safety kits, as well as making things that go on the vehicle, which can include emission control devices and diesel, what we call a diesel sensor. As you can see from the chart, in 2013, that accounted for $14.6 million of our revenue. We were at about $34 million last year. We additionally have a clean downtown and landscape and refuse and trash removal concentration in our downtown area, which I'm going to spend a little time talking about. We additionally have an operation called Greenworks, which is an industrial recycling business for our public utility. That's a little bit of a misnomer in that we have been an independent, separate, nonprofit subsidiary of Goodwill Industries of Greater Detroit for 4 years, but we had done this work for our public utility on site for 70-plus years. We got back in the donated goods business 4 years ago, and I'll spend a little time talking about that briefly. We have exited that business at least twice. I'm told 3 times. I can't find that documentation because we didn't do it well. So when you can have social enterprise opportunities where you don't do well, and the smart business decision is to exit it, which we have done in the past. We are now back in the business with 3 operating stores and 2 to open in 2014. And finally, as we exited the donated goods business, we wanted to try to do something in retail, and there was an opportunity with the Ben & Jerry's ice cream franchise chain that we, and they had I think they called it a partnership shop, essentially waiving the franchise fees for operating a ice cream store, and we've done that for 9 years. That, unlike some of our other programs, focuses on youth at risk, and we have operated it for 9 years with better and better success as downtown Detroit revitalizes. Our automotive business, the population served includes developmentally disabled, under and unemployed folks, as well as returning citizens from our prison system, and then the other businesses are similar. One of the success stories I wanted to spend some time in talking to you about, primarily because of how it came about and how we seized an opportunity to expand and make it a more permanent business for us than initially was conceived. Back in 2006, the city of Detroit hosted the Super Bowl, and it was determined by the leader of that Super Bowl organization here locally, Roger Penske, shortly before the Super Bowl began in February of '06, that the streets of Detroit were still not where he wanted them to be. And he wanted help. Our folks at our public utility, DTE, said, we know some organization that can help us and help us quickly. And that was Goodwill Industries of Greater Detroit. So we got boots on the ground, as they say, in 48 hours, helped them with that effort, and out of that came a push to continue improving the appearance of Detroit, and we were essentially the labor source for that operation, and we do it with employees as well as trainees or people having the opportunity to have transitional work experience. That, in addition, has broadened to work with the Grand Prix that was just held, some of you may be aware of, on our Island City Park, Belle Isle, about 2 weeks ago, and we do the work there as well, and it really has improved the entire Detroit visitors experience here for that and many other events. Just a quick stat on that, we've had almost 1,000 folks work with us throughout the years since '06, and during their experience we've had an 85% retention rate. I thought I pushed the button there. Okay. Just quickly, let me talk a little bit about our donated goods experience. We closed our retail division the first time in 1975. We went back into it in 1984, got to the point we had 13 stores. Unfortunately, we were in a position of losing $1 million a year. Our board determined that we would exit that business given that performance. We closed that our last store in 2000 from that endeavor. I got a lot of encouragement from some of my colleagues around the Goodwill Network to look again at that opportunity. We did a business assessment of what we had done wrong in the past and what we believe we could do and do well again, given our Goodwill strong brand throughout the nation. At the same time, we knew that some of our support from a government or grant perspective would probably be lessening over time, and this was something we felt we could do once again. And if we did it right and carefully, we would, in fact, augment our earned revenue stream. So with that, I hired a Ford executive that had really backroom experience, production material control experience, rather than necessarily retail experience. We search for appropriate locations and once again re-entered the business in December of 2010. So we will, by the end of this year, we'll be at 5 stores with the plan of 2 additional stores a year in our territory. There we go. Just to give you, I know Matt had talked about that some of you would be interested in integration into the community and how we go about doing that. Certainly the Super Bowl experience that I talked about, what's grown now is the business owners in the downtown area have passed a business improvement zone tax or fee that they will pay, and we will be supported financially that way going forward to maintain the clean downtown efforts that we have done. Our automotive experience with the big 3 or the tier 1 domestic autos have brought an opportunity for us to do work with automotive suppliers. We also are expanding our employees and trainees, having the experience now that the auto business is stronger, where some of our folks can work with us for a period of time and then test with various domestic autos and perhaps be hired themselves in jobs that are quite worthwhile from a wage perspective. So those are 2 areas that we have been able to integrate our efforts and mission into the community and the corporate environment. Matt had asked for some suggestions from a social enterprise experience. These are probably ones that I have lived firsthand myself. You do have to take risks, and you have to not be afraid to fail. Certainly our retail or donated goods experience would indicate that we have failed at something and have exited, but that doesn't mean that we didn't over time realize that if we did it and did it right, we would be able to do it. Certainly we do things that we're good at or find something you're good at. This, when you're starting with a clean sheet of paper, I imagine that's more difficult than an organization like ours where we have 90-plus years of experience, but you need to think in terms of what would make sense for your organization and what you would be what you would be good at. One of the things I found when I got here is I had some folks that were not in good fits for their skill set and their, particularly at the leadership or management level, and I made those changes. It's important to not be afraid to make those changes and continuously look to make sure you've got the right fit. It's important to collaborate. Just about everything that we do here in Detroit, we have various partners that we collaborate with. Certainly we are a focus on employment and training. We don't dabble with hungry or homeless, but on the other hand, we have a number of partners that help us do wraparound services such that individuals are supported in the areas that they need to be. Know your market. I know Jim briefly touched on some of the new things, boutiques and those kinds of efforts that other Goodwills are doing. We just recently are taking an opportunity presented to us in our what we call the Eastern Market, but it's essentially an urban market where foods and flowers and all sorts of things are sold throughout the warm season. Their sheds have been expanded to provide weekend opportunities for various boutiques, and we are having a pop-up boutique at the Eastern Market during the summer weekend holiday hours, and gives us an opportunity to share our message, expose folks to our other donated goods and retail operations, as well as to do actual sales at that event. We came up with a name called YB Blue. Blue is the Goodwill color, and it gives us an opportunity to explain all the things that we do here in Metro Detroit. Obviously, I've talked a little bit about exiting a business. I mentioned donated goods. We also really haven't been able to successfully or recently make it work with the Dell recycling that a number of Goodwills do, and we're doing it in a different way going forward. And I'm fond of saying mission with no money is no mission. We always are running our Goodwill operation here in Detroit, and I think this is true of most of my colleagues, is to ensure that you are doing it in a financially responsible and stable way. Some of our plans going forward, and I know Jim touched on that, constantly looking for new avenues for experience. We, at our industrial recycling business, Greenworks, we have just started an oil filter crushing business. Again, that's with the thought that you are recycling and repurposing the oil that comes out of an oil filter, as well as the steel that is crushed and then sold for its commodity value. Again, with the thought that this is not tossed away but recycled, repurposed, or reused. We're just, as I mentioned, opening more stores, as well as we just began to expand our online book sales. A number of Goodwills do the e-commerce efforts, and we too are going to expand into that area. And then I mentioned our YB Blue experience. Finally, a little bit about, we measure the people we serve in the various communities that we're involved in, as well as the people that we place. The next few slides are primarily focusing on the people that we serve in various categories. We have responsibility for the city of Detroit, and then Wayne County, Macomb County, and Oakland County. We're currently not in Livingston County, which is within our territory. Measuring where we serve them, and then their profiles, and then focusing on employment retention outcomes. We track an individual for 90, 180, and then finally 1 year as to their success in the workplace. We also track, because when we work with an individual on their person-centered plan, they can have positive outcomes that also are important, that are not necessarily non-employment or not necessarily employment-based. And last year that was 663 clients, and there were a number, in addition to going through one of our programs, they also have transitional experience or finished a high school degree. Those kinds of measurements are important. And I think I'm in a position to perhaps answer some questions, Matt.
Great, Lorna. Thanks so much. Sounds like some great work going on in Detroit. You mentioned kind of the exiting process a few times, and I know some of the exiting from the donated goods business happened before your time. But I'd be curious to hear your thought, or someone asked a question in terms of what are some things that you should consider when you're exiting? What is kind of the dividing line of when you decide to cut your losses and exit a business?
Well, with the donated goods business, it was building over time because I was a board member at the time. We exited back in 2000 or 99 and 2000. It became pretty clear to the board and the board pressures to management that the track we were on, or the trend, was unsustainable, and with that could have essentially brought the rest of the organization down. So I think you have to think in terms of not only are you doing good from a social enterprise standpoint, is it sustainable from a financial standpoint? So you have to constantly look at that. Another example that's kind of the opposite of that is our Ben & Jerry's experience has been such that on occasion we watch that and say, are we being successful in our mission, and is it not being too much of a drain on our resources? And we've remodeled and repurposed that business model a couple times in how we operate. For example, we're only open 9 months out of the year instead of 12 months out of the year because people don't eat ice cream in the dead of winter in Detroit. We also went back and worked with our landlord to modify our lease and what we pay from a rent and a utilities, etc., charges. So you have to kindly, if you do enter into a business, you have to give it a chance to be successful, but you also have to keep a mindset of, am I doing this? Am I doing it well?
Right. So the flip side of that question, I guess, as you saw earlier on in the webinar, that I think about 40% of the people on the webinar today are interested in starting a social enterprise or considering starting a social enterprise. So the flip side of that is, how does an organization know whether they're ready to go down that road? What kind of homework do they need to do beforehand? What are the pieces and capacities they need to put in place before they launch a venture in kind of general terms?
Well, I would say that, as I mentioned under my advice slide, you need to look in terms of what you're doing and what you're doing well, whether that's an enterprise at this point in time. So recently, the gentleman who heads up Crime Stoppers talked to me a little bit about we need to generate revenue for our organization. They have a very well-run, apparently, call center for taking tips on crimes. And his thinking is perhaps that would be something that would be marketable to other companies to use, and they could charge for that service. So, when someone's interested in starting a social enterprise, I would really start first where your skills or your experience as an organization might be. That is, I think, the key starting point. You have to think in terms of where your investment's going to come from. Do you have resources within the organization that you can invest in it, or are you going to look for some type of foundation investment? It's really like starting a business and being an entrepreneur. And while I wish there was a specific formula on how to do it, I think it's important for you to start where you have some expertise and then augment it with staff who have the business experience.
Great. So I've talked to some Goodwills around the country, and sometimes people refer to there being kind of two sides of the house in a Goodwill. There's the store or business that involves kind of, the retail operations or the business operations, and then there's the workforce development or job training arm. And I think many workforce organizations that run social enterprises often struggle with the enterprise becoming kind of its own individual silo within their organization. How do you kind of work to integrate the business team with the workforce development team in your own operations in Detroit?
Well, that's a great question, Matt, because that was probably our biggest failing when I got here in late '07, early '08, is we were silos. Everything that I saw was, well, what am I doing? What's my success in employment and training or automotive or name whatever business? And it took a leadership, I don't know that I'd say reorganization, but a leadership intervention to say, we can only be successful as Goodwill, not as individual departments or organizations. There was battling back and forth about who was being charged for the wages and how it should look, and all sorts of what I considered very non-productive work effort. And so I spent a lot of time with my executive team developing the efforts and the mechanisms to ensure that we were the first team, that it was most important for us to be integrated and looking at the success of Goodwill overall. So hopefully that doesn't sound too much like motherhood and apple pie, but it is important that the organization, whatever it is, and I would agree with you, I think you have to kind of fight against individual departments, but feeling that they are the sole important part of the organization. And I think I alluded to this earlier, I made some management changes. We had some fits that did not work in the way it was conceived. So you have to constantly look at, are people putting your organization, whatever that might be, first and foremost to complete the mission, not how many license plate kits you made this week or how you went about doing it. And certainly we have to work very closely together, is because many of our businesses rely on our transitional employees or clients to run our businesses. So there's a lot of collaboration from a manpower planning standpoint that has to take place. So I guess I would have to say that if that's a problem, you have to recognize that problem and address it.
And then one final question. You talked a little bit about your kind of business background that you brought to Goodwill. How important is it to have that when you're thinking about running a social enterprise, that kind of business expertise, that business acumen? What role does that play in making sure that a social enterprise is successful?
I don't think you could underestimate the importance of that piece of the puzzle. I don't know that it absolutely has to be the CEO or the leader of the organization, but I think you need to have it. You have to have strong financial expertise and experience. You need to have, frankly, someone who can sell your enterprise, whatever that is, so you need good sales experience. It's not solely important to know your business, but how to sell it, communicate, manage it. So I think having a business major team player for an organization that is contemplating social enterprises is critical.
Right. Well, Lorna, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to share what you're doing in Detroit today and all of your lessons learned. I want to thank Jim Gibbons again for his time and effort to put together today's presentation and to join us. We're at our end time. We didn't get to all of your questions, I'm sure. I apologize for that, but we did have a great turnout today. I think at one point we had 160 or 170 people on today's webinar. Stay tuned for part 4 of our webinar series, Leveraging the Social Enterprise Experience to Improve Job Quality. You should look for that probably after this summer. If you want to look at the old webinar recordings or look at videos of our discussions in our Working in America series or just check out any of our other research and events, you can go to aspenwsi.org. Thank you all once again for joining us, and we'll see you next time.